You know that feeling when something's off, but you can't quite put your finger on it? That's how I felt about Sarah's sudden interest in running errands. My wife of 8 years had never been the type to volunteer for grocery runs or pharmacy trips. Hell, she used to complain when I asked her to pick up milk on her way home from work. But 3 months ago, everything changed. "Hey Jack, mind if I borrow your car tonight?" Sarah asked, not looking up from her phone as she painted her nails a deep red color I'd never seen her wear before. "I need to run some errands." I glanced up from my laptop where I was reviewing blueprints for the hardware store renovation. "What kind of errands require my truck at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday?" "Just stuff. You know how it is." She waved her hand dismissively, still focused on her manicure. "My car's making that weird noise again." Her Honda was 3 years old and ran perfectly fine, but I didn't argue. Marriage is about picking your battles, and car borrowing seemed like a small hill to die on. "Sure, keys are on the counter," I said. What I didn't expect was for her to disappear for 3 days. When I called her Wednesday morning, she sounded rushed. "Still dealing with things, Jack. I'll be back Friday, okay? Don't wait up." The line went dead before I could ask what things required a 72-hour commitment. This pattern repeated itself 6 times over the next 2 months. Sarah would ask to borrow my truck for errands, then vanish for days at a time. When she returned, she'd be exhausted, but oddly glowing, like she'd been at some expensive spa retreat instead of running mundane tasks. The breaking point came when Pete, my assistant manager at Lawton Hardware, mentioned seeing my truck parked outside the Seaside Motor Lodge on Route 1. "Thought maybe you were checking out their renovation project," Pete said, scratching his gray beard. But when I drove by again 2 hours later, it was still there. "Everything okay at home, boss?" Everything was definitely not okay at home. That evening, I made a decision that would change everything. I drove to Radio Shack and bought a small GPS tracker, the kind paranoid parents use to monitor teenage drivers. The device was no bigger than a matchbox and could be hidden easily under the dashboard. "Planning to spy on someone?" the clerk joked as he rang up my purchase. "Something like that," I replied. I installed the tracker that night while Sarah was in the shower, humming some song I didn't recognize. The device paired with an app on my phone, giving me real-time location data for my truck. I felt guilty for about 10 minutes. Then I remembered the 3-day disappearing acts and the way Sarah had started password protecting her phone after 8 years of leaving it unlocked on the counter. Friday afternoon, right on schedule, Sarah emerged from our bedroom wearing a dress I'd never seen before. "Need the truck again tonight, Jack. More errands." "What store stays open past midnight on Friday?" I asked, testing the waters. "It's complicated," she said, avoiding my eyes. "I'll explain later." She kissed my cheek, a quick, obligatory peck, and grabbed my keys. 5 minutes later, I watched my truck disappear down Maple Street through our living room window. I waited exactly 1 hour before checking the GPS app. The little blue dot on my phone screen showed my truck moving north on Interstate 95, well past any legitimate shopping areas. It continued for 47 miles before stopping at coordinates that Google Maps identified as the Pineview Motor Inn. My hands shook as I stared at the screen. The truck had been stationary for 20 minutes. I could have called, I could have texted, I could have waited until morning and confronted Sarah with questions and demands for explanations. Instead, I grabbed my spare car keys and drove to the Pineview Motor Inn. The drive took 53 minutes, giving me plenty of time to cycle through every emotion possible: anger, hurt, disbelief, rage, and back to hurt again. By the time I pulled into the motel parking lot, I'd settled into a cold, calculating calm that surprised me. My truck was parked in space 47, directly in front of room 12. The neon vacancy sign cast everything in an ugly red glow that seemed appropriate for the situation. I parked 3 spaces away and waited. At 11:43 p.m., the door to room 12 opened. Sarah walked out first, laughing at something someone had said inside. She looked relaxed and happy in a way I hadn't seen her look around me in months. Her hair was tousled, her dress wrinkled. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. The man who followed her out was tall, dark-haired, and wearing an expensive-looking suit despite the late hour. He put his hand on the small of Sarah's back as they walked toward my truck, and she leaned into him like they'd done this dance 100 times before. They were so focused on each other that neither noticed the figure sitting in the Honda Civic 3 spaces away. I watched my wife of 8 years unlock my truck for another man, watched her kiss him goodbye. Not the quick peck she'd given me, but a long, passionate kiss that made my stomach turn. watched him squeeze her ass before she climbed into the driver's seat. As Sarah started the engine, I started mine. I followed at a distance as she drove the man to what appeared to be his apartment complex 15 minutes away. More kissing, more touching, more evidence that my marriage was a lie. After dropping off her lover, Sarah drove to a 24-hour diner and sat in the parking lot for nearly an hour. Probably composing herself, I realized. Getting her story straight for when she came home. I didn't confront her that night, or the next morning when she returned home with a bag from CVS and some story about helping her friend Lisa through a crisis. Instead, I started planning. The next 2 weeks were the longest of my life. I went through the motions of normal married life while secretly documenting Sarah's affair through the GPS tracker. The pattern was sickeningly consistent. Every Tuesday and Friday, she'd borrow my truck for errands that led straight to the Pineview Motor Inn. I started taking photos, not of them together, I wasn't ready to see that again, but of my truck in the motel parking lot. Time-stamped evidence that my wife was spending her evenings 47 miles from home. The hardest part wasn't the betrayal itself, but pretending everything was normal. Sarah would come home from her errands and crawl into bed next to me like nothing had happened. She'd kiss me good morning and ask about my day and suggest we watch Netflix together on the weekends. Meanwhile, I was dying inside. "You've been quiet lately," she said one morning over coffee. "Everything okay?" I looked at my wife across our kitchen table. Really looked at her. When had she started wearing makeup to run errands? When had she bought all these new clothes I didn't recognize? When had she become a stranger living in my house? "Just work stuff," I lied. "The renovation is stressing me out." "Maybe you should take some time off," she suggested, stirring sugar into her coffee. "We could go somewhere nice, just the two of us." The irony was overwhelming. Sarah was suggesting a romantic getaway while actively cheating on me twice a week. "Maybe," I said. That afternoon at the hardware store, I finally broke down and told Pete everything. We were doing inventory in the back room, surrounded by boxes of screws and paint cans, when the words just spilled out of me. "My wife is having an affair." Pete stopped counting washers and looked at me with the kind of sympathy that made my chest tight. "You sure about that, Jack?" I showed him the GPS tracking data, the photos, the timeline of Sarah's mysterious errands. Pete studied everything with the methodical attention he usually reserved for complex electrical problems. "Son of a bitch," he finally said. "I'm sorry, boss. That's really rough." "What would you do?" I asked. Pete was 63 years old and had been married to his wife Margaret for 42 years. If anyone had wisdom about marriage, it was him. "Well," he said slowly, "I'd probably want to know who the other guy is first. Know your enemy and all that." He was right. I had evidence of the affair, but I didn't know anything about Sarah's lover beyond his expensive suits and wandering hands. That evening, I made another decision that crossed several lines of normal behavior. I drove back to the Pineview Motor Inn, not to confront anyone, but to gather intelligence. The desk clerk was a tired-looking woman in her 50s who seemed grateful for any human interaction. "Excuse me," I said. "I'm supposed to meet my business partner here, but I can't remember which room he's in. Tall guy, dark hair, probably with a blonde woman." "Oh, you mean Mr. Davidson," she said without hesitation. "Room 12, but I think he already left for the evening." Davidson. I had a name. "Right, Davidson. I always forget his first name." "Rick," she supplied helpfully. "Rick Davidson. Nice guy. He and his lady friend have been regulars for a few months now." My stomach dropped. A few months. This wasn't a recent fling or a moment of weakness. Sarah had been systematically cheating on me for months, using my own truck to do it. "Thanks," I managed to say. I spent the next day doing online research that made me feel like a stalker, but I needed to know who Rick Davidson was. Social media made it embarrassingly easy. Rick Davidson, 34, owned a small but successful marketing consultancy in Portland. His LinkedIn profile showed a graduate degree from Boston University and a client list that included several local businesses I recognized. His Facebook page was full of photos from expensive restaurants, weekend trips to ski resorts, and professional headshots that screamed, "I think I'm God's gift to women." He was also married. Rick Davidson's wife was named Jennifer, and she appeared in exactly 3 photos on his social media: their wedding picture from 2019, a Christmas photo from 2020, and nothing since then. Meanwhile, there were dozens of photos of Rick with various women at bars, restaurants, and parties. The guy was a serial cheater, and my wife was just his latest conquest. This revelation should have made me feel better somehow, like Sarah was the victim of a professional manipulator rather than an active participant in destroying our marriage. Instead, it made me furious. Sarah wasn't some naive woman who'd been seduced by a smooth talker. She was a 32-year-old real estate agent who knew exactly what she was doing. She'd looked at our 8-year marriage and decided it was worth less than hotel room encounters with a married man who collected affairs like trophies. I started planning my revenge that night. But first, I needed to know if anyone else was aware of Sarah's extracurricular activities. Our social circle was small but tight-knit. 2 other couples we'd known since college who we saw regularly for dinner parties and weekend barbecues. Mike and Jennifer Chen had been our closest friends for years. If anyone would know about Sarah's affair, or if anyone would support me when the truth came out, it would be them. I called Mike the next evening while Sarah was at her book club, which I now suspected was code for something else entirely. "Hey man, want to grab a beer?" I asked. "I need to talk to someone." We met at Murphy's Pub, our usual spot for guys' nights out. Mike could tell something was wrong the moment I walked in. "You look like hell," he said, sliding a beer across the table. "What's going on?" I told him everything. The mysterious errands, the GPS tracker, the motel visits, Rick Davidson. Mike listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each detail. "Jesus, Jack," he said when I finished. "I had no idea. Sarah she's been acting normal around us." "Has she said anything to Jennifer? About being unhappy or wanting something different?" Mike shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Actually, now that you mention it, Jennifer did say Sarah's been asking weird questions lately." "What kind of questions?" "About whether Jennifer ever wondered what it would be like to be with other people. Whether she thought marriage was supposed to feel exciting all the time. Jennifer thought Sarah was just going through some kind of midlife crisis thing." A midlife crisis. That's what my wife's affair had been reduced to in our friends' minds. A phase she was going through, like taking up yoga or buying a sports car. "Are you going to confront her?" Mike asked. "Eventually, but first, I want to make sure I have all the facts." "What do you mean?" I took a long drink of my beer before answering. "I want to catch them together. I want evidence that's so undeniable that Sarah can't lie her way out of it." Mike looked uncomfortable. "Jack, maybe you should just talk to her. Ask her directly what's going on." "So she can lie to my face again? No thanks." "But this spy stuff, it's not healthy, man. It's making you paranoid and angry." "I'm angry because my wife is fucking another man twice a week using my truck," I snapped. "The spy stuff is just helping me document it." Mike raised his hands in surrender. Okay, I get it. You're hurt. But what's your endgame here? What happens after you get your undeniable evidence?" That was the question I'd been avoiding. What did happen next? Divorce, obviously. But beyond that, I hadn't thought through the practical implications of blowing up my marriage. "I don't know," I admitted. "I guess I'll figure it out when I get there." We finished our beers in relative silence. As we were leaving, Mike grabbed my arm. "Whatever you decide to do," he said, "Jennifer and I are on your side. Sarah's our friend too, but what she's doing, it's not right." I appreciated the support, but I could already sense the awkwardness that would come when our friend group inevitably split along loyalty lines. Mike and Jennifer might support me in principle, but Sarah was Jennifer's shopping buddy and girls' night companion. These things were never as clean as people wanted them to be. Walking to my car, I realized I was about to lose more than just my marriage. I was about to lose the entire life I'd built over the past 8 years, but I was too angry to care. Friday night arrived with the predictability of a death sentence. Sarah emerged from our bedroom at 8:30 p.m. wearing a black dress I'd never seen before and perfume that seemed too expensive for a trip to Target. "Borrowing the truck again," she announced, not bothering to frame it as a question anymore. "More errands?" I asked, not looking up from the baseball game on TV. "You know how it is?" Except I did know how it was, and it had nothing to do with errands. I waited until 9:15 p.m. before checking the GPS app. The little blue dot was already moving north on I-95, right on schedule. By 10:20 p.m., it was stationary at the Pineview Motor Inn. This time, I didn't just drive to the motel. I prepared for war. I dressed in dark clothes, brought a camera with a zoom lens that I'd borrowed from Pete, who had asked no questions, and mentally rehearsed what I would say when I finally confronted my cheating wife. The drive to the motel felt different this time. Instead of the sick dread that had accompanied my previous trips, I felt a cold determination. Tonight, the charade ended. I parked in the same spot as before and settled in to wait. Through the camera's viewfinder, I could see my truck clearly, along with the door to room 12. At 11:52 p.m., the door opened. Sarah appeared first, laughing at something Rick had said. She was disheveled in a way that left no doubt about what they'd been doing for the past hour and a half. Rick followed close behind, his expensive suit wrinkled, his hair messed up. I took photos of everything. Sarah leaning against my truck while Rick pressed her against the driver's side door, their hands all over each other. The long, passionate kiss that lasted nearly a full minute. When they finally broke apart, I heard Sarah say, "I wish we could do this more often." "Soon," Rick replied, running his hand through her hair. "Once I get the divorce finalized, we won't have to sneak around anymore." Divorce. Rick was getting divorced, which meant this affair wasn't just a fling. It was Sarah's audition for being his next wife. They kissed again before Sarah climbed into my truck. I took photos of Rick walking to his own car, a silver BMW that probably cost more than I made in 6 months, and followed Sarah as she drove him back to his apartment complex. More kissing, more touching, more evidence that my marriage was completely over. But instead of driving to the diner to compose herself like she had before, Sarah drove straight home. I barely beat her there, parking my Honda in the garage and pretending to be asleep when she slipped into bed at 1:30 a.m. She smelled like sex and another man's cologne. I lay awake until dawn, staring at the ceiling and planning my next move. Saturday morning, Sarah was unusually affectionate. She made me breakfast, suggested we spend the day together, and kept touching my arm while we talked. The guilt was finally getting to her, I realized. Or maybe Rick had said something that made her want to cover her tracks better. "I was thinking we could drive up to Camden today," she suggested, refilling my coffee cup. "Walk around the harbor, maybe have lunch at that place you like." "Sounds nice," I lied. We spent the day playing the role of a happy married couple. Sarah held my hand as we walked through Camden's downtown area. She laughed at my jokes and suggested we buy a bottle of wine to share later. To any outside observer, we looked like newlyweds instead of a couple whose marriage was dying. The performance was so convincing that I almost forgot about the photos on my camera and the GPS tracker hidden in my truck. Almost. That evening, as Sarah was getting ready for bed, I made my decision. "Hey, Sarah," I called from the living room. "Can you come here for a minute?" She appeared in the doorway wearing the silk pajamas I'd bought her for Christmas, looking beautiful and innocent and completely unaware that her world was about to implode. "What's up?" she asked. I held up my camera and scrolled to the first photo. Sarah and Rick kissing against my truck in the motel parking lot. The color drained from her face. "Jack, I can explain." "Can you?" I interrupted, scrolling to the next photo. "Because I'd love to hear how you explain this. Or this one where you're telling Rick you wish you could fuck him more often." Sarah's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. She looked so small and vulnerable standing there in her silk pajamas, caught in a lie that was too big to explain away. Then I remembered the months of deception and the feeling passed. "How long have you been following me?" she finally asked. "How long have you been cheating on me?" "It's not what you think." "It's exactly what I think," I exploded, standing up from the couch. "You've been fucking Rick Davidson twice a week for months, using my truck to do it and lying to my face every single day." Sarah flinched at my tone, but she didn't deny it. We both knew there was no point. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she said quietly. It started as a friendship, and then you decided our marriage wasn't worth preserving." "Our marriage has been over for years, Jack. We both know that." The words hit me like a physical blow. Not because they were cruel, but because there was truth in them that I hadn't wanted to acknowledge. "So instead of talking to me about it, you decided to start auditioning for your next husband?" "It's not like that." "It's exactly like that. Rick told you he's getting divorced. You're planning a future with him." Sarah's composure cracked completely. Tears started streaming down her face, and she sank into the armchair across from me. "I love him," she whispered. Those 3 words destroyed whatever was left of my heart. I could have handled the sex, the lying, even the months of deception. But hearing Sarah say she loved another man made everything real in a way that photos and GPS coordinates couldn't. "Then why are you still here?" I asked. "Why keep pretending with me?" "Because I'm scared," she admitted. "Rick says he's getting divorced, but what if he doesn't? What if he changes his mind? I can't just throw away 8 years of marriage for something that might not work out." And there it was, the truth that made everything even worse. Sarah wasn't leaving me because she was madly in love and couldn't help herself. She was keeping me as a backup plan while she test drove my replacement. I was her safety net while she figured out if Rick Davidson was worth the risk. "Get out," I said quietly. "Jack, please. Get out of my house. Tonight. Where am I supposed to go?" "I don't care. Go to Rick's place. Go to your sister's. Go back to the fucking motel for all I care. But you're not sleeping in my bed tonight." Sarah started crying harder, but she didn't argue. She went upstairs and packed a bag while I sat in the living room, staring at the photos on my camera and wondering how I'd gotten here. 20 minutes later, she came back downstairs with a suitcase and her car keys. "I'll call you tomorrow," she said. "When you've had time to cool down, we can figure out how to work through this." "There's nothing to work through, Sarah. We're getting divorced." She opened her mouth to argue, then seemed to realize there was nothing left to say. She walked out of our house and out of my life, leaving me alone with the wreckage of our marriage. I poured myself a large whiskey and tried to figure out what came next. The next week was a blur of lawyers, paperwork, and well-meaning friends who didn't know what to say. I filed for divorce on Monday morning, citing adultery and providing my attorney with enough photographic evidence to make Sarah's infidelity undeniable. "This is pretty cut and dried," my lawyer, Tom Bradley, said as he reviewed the photos. "Maine is a no-fault divorce state, but adultery can still affect property division and alimony. With evidence this clear, you should come out ahead." I should have felt vindicated, but mostly I just felt empty. The news of our separation spread through our social circle faster than I'd expected. By Wednesday, I'd received awkward phone calls from Mike and Jennifer, Sarah's sister Lisa, and even my mother-in-law, who seemed more concerned about the family's reputation than her daughter's marriage. "Jack, honey," Margaret said during a particularly uncomfortable phone conversation, "I know Sarah made some mistakes, but don't you think divorce is a little extreme? Maybe you two could try counseling." "She's been having an affair for months, Margaret, with a married man, using my truck." "Well, yes, but..." "There's no but. It's over." The hardest conversation was with Pete, who'd been watching me fall apart all week while trying to manage the hardware store renovation. "You look like hell," he said Friday afternoon as we reviewed contractor invoices. "When's the last time you slept?" "I sleep. I mean really sleep. Not whatever you've been doing that leaves you looking like an extra from a zombie movie." He wasn't wrong. I'd been averaging maybe 3 hours a night since Sarah left, spending most of my time staring at the ceiling and replaying our 8-year marriage in my head, looking for signs I'd missed. "It gets easier," Pete said. "The not sleeping, the constant anger, the feeling like your whole life was a lie. It all gets easier." "You sound like you're speaking from experience." Pete was quiet for a long moment. "My first wife cheated on me too, 25 years ago. Thought I'd never get over it." I'd known Pete for 6 years and had no idea he'd been married before Margaret. "What happened?" "Caught her with my brother," he said matter-of-factly. "At our house, in our bed, on my birthday." "Jesus, Pete." "Yeah, took me about 2 years to stop being angry enough to commit murder. But eventually, I realized staying angry was just letting them win. They'd already taken my marriage and my relationship with my brother. I wasn't going to let them take my sanity too." "How did you move on?" "Focused on building something better, met Margaret 3 years later, and we've been happy ever since. But I had to let go of the anger first." I appreciated Pete's wisdom, but I wasn't ready to let go of anything yet. The anger was the only thing keeping me functional. That evening, I got a text from Sarah. "Can we talk? I'm staying at Lisa's if you want to call." I deleted the message without responding. Saturday brought an unexpected visitor. I was working in my garage, trying to distract myself by organizing tools, when a silver BMW pulled into my driveway. Rick Davidson stepped out wearing jeans and a polo shirt that probably cost more than most people's rent. He looked exactly like his Facebook photos, tall, handsome, and radiating the kind of confidence that came from never facing real consequences for his actions. "Jack Lawton?" he asked, approaching the garage with his hands visible, like he was trying not to spook a dangerous animal. "What do you want, Rick?" He seemed surprised that I knew his name, but recovered quickly. "I wanted to talk to you man to man," he said, "about Sarah." "There's nothing to talk about." "Look, I know this situation is fucked up. You're fucking my wife in hotel rooms using my truck, and you want to have a conversation about it?" Rick had the decency to look uncomfortable. "I know how it looks, but it's not that simple. Sarah and I, we have something real. She's not happy in her marriage, and I'm getting divorced anyway." "So you thought you'd help her cheat her way out of it?" "I didn't plan for this to happen. We met at a business networking event 6 months ago, and there was just this connection." "6 months?" I interrupted. "Sarah told me it started 3 months ago." Rick's face went pale as he realized his mistake. Look, the timeline doesn't matter. What matters is that Sarah loves me and I love her. We want to be together." "Then why isn't she here having this conversation?" "Because she's afraid of hurting you more than she already has." The audacity was breathtaking. Sarah had been systematically lying to me for half a year, but she was concerned about hurting my feelings during the breakup conversation. "Get off my property," I said. "Jack, be reasonable." "Get off my fucking property." Rick backed toward his BMW, hands raised. "I'm trying to handle this like adults here." "Adults don't fuck other people's spouses in cheap motels." "Sarah's going to leave you anyway," he said, his composure finally cracking. "With or without me. Your marriage is over. At least this way, she has somewhere to go." He drove away before I could respond, leaving me standing in my garage with my hands shaking from rage. That night, I called Mike and Jennifer and asked them to meet me for dinner. I needed to be around people who knew me before my life imploded. We met at Giuseppe's, an Italian place where Sarah and I had celebrated our anniversary 3 years running. The irony wasn't lost on me. "How are you holding up?" Jennifer asked after we'd ordered. "I've been better." "Sarah called me yesterday," she said carefully. "She wanted me to ask if you'd consider marriage counseling." "She sent Rick to my house this afternoon to explain how much they love each other. I don't think counseling is going to fix that." Mike nearly choked on his beer. "She sent her boyfriend to your house?" "He wanted to have a man-to-man conversation about the situation." "What did you tell him?" "To get off my property before I called the police." Jennifer looked uncomfortable. "Jack, I know you're angry, and you have every right to be, but maybe you should consider what Sarah's going through, too." "What Sarah's going through?" I repeated. "She's confused and scared and probably feeling guilty about everything. She made a mistake, but she's still our friend." I stared at Jennifer across the table, trying to process what I was hearing. "She's been cheating on me for 6 months. 6 months, Jennifer. That's not a mistake. That's a deliberate choice she made every single day." "I'm not defending what she did," Jennifer said quickly. "I'm just saying that maybe there's a way to work through this without destroying everything." "She already destroyed everything." Mike reached across the table and put his hand on my arm. "Jennifer's just trying to help. We all are." But I could see the truth in their faces. They felt bad for me, but they also felt bad for Sarah. In their minds, this was a complicated situation where everyone was a victim and everyone deserved compassion. They didn't understand that Sarah had made a choice to betray our marriage every Tuesday and Friday for 6 months. They saw it as a relationship that had gone wrong, not as a deliberate campaign of deception and lies. "I think I should go," I said, standing up from the table. "Jack, wait," Jennifer started. "It's fine. I get it. Sarah's your friend too, and you don't want to take sides. But I can't sit here and listen to you make excuses for what she did." I left money for my untouched dinner and walked out of the restaurant, knowing that I'd probably just lost my closest friends along with my wife. The drive home was the loneliest 20 minutes of my life. 2 weeks after Rick's visit to my house, I was still angry enough to do something stupid. The divorce proceedings were moving forward, but slowly. Sarah was fighting the adultery allegations despite the photographic evidence, claiming the photos were taken out of context and that her relationship with Rick had never been physical. Her lawyer was apparently as delusional as she was. Meanwhile, I'd been doing research on Rick Davidson that went far beyond casual social media stalking. I'd learned that his marketing consultancy was struggling financially, that he was behind on his office rent, and that his divorce from Jennifer Davidson was getting nasty. I'd also learned that Rick had a pattern of affairs with clients and business contacts, and that Sarah wasn't his only current side piece. This last piece of information came from an unlikely source, Rick's soon-to-be ex-wife. Jennifer Davidson had found my phone number somehow and called me on a Thursday evening while I was eating a frozen dinner and feeling sorry for myself. "Is this Jack Lawton?" she asked. "Yes. Who's this?" "Jennifer Davidson. I think we need to talk." We met the next day at a coffee shop in Portland, far enough from my hometown that we wouldn't run into anyone we knew. Jennifer was an attractive brunette in her early 30s who looked exhausted in the way that only comes from dealing with a cheating spouse and a contentious divorce. "I know about your wife," she said without preamble. "Rick's been seeing her for months." "I'm sorry," I said. "I know this situation sucks for both of us." "It sucks worse than you think. Rick's been cheating on me for our entire marriage. Your wife is just the latest in a long line." She pulled out her phone and showed me photos that made my stomach turn. Rick with various women at restaurants, hotels, and what appeared to be business conferences. The photos were dated over the past 3 years. "He's a serial cheater," Jennifer continued, "and he's good at it. He targets married women who are unhappy or going through rough patches, makes them feel special and understood, promises them he's going to leave me for them." "Is he actually getting divorced?" "Only because I filed first. He would have kept this going indefinitely if I hadn't caught him." "How did you catch him?" Jennifer smiled grimly. "Hired a private investigator. Cost me $5,000, but it was worth it to have evidence that would hold up in court. What kind of evidence? Photos, videos, financial records showing he was spending our money on hotel rooms and gifts for his girlfriends, enough to prove adultery and get a favorable divorce settlement. An idea began forming in my mind. Jennifer, would you be willing to share some of that evidence with me? What do you have in mind? I want to destroy Rick Davidson's life the same way he destroyed mine. Jennifer's smile turned predatory. I thought you'd never ask. We spent the next 2 hours planning Rick's downfall with the methodical precision of military strategists. Jennifer had evidence of Rick's affairs with at least 6 different women over the past 3 years, including financial records, hotel receipts, and compromising photos. More importantly, she had evidence that Rick had been embezzling money from his business clients to fund his extracurricular activities. He's been overcharging clients and skimming the difference, Jennifer explained. Small amounts, but it adds up. I estimate he's stolen about $30,000 over the past 2 years. That's a felony. It sure is. Why haven't you turned him in already? Because I wanted to use it as leverage in the divorce. But if you're willing to help me take him down completely, I'm willing to share. We shook hands on our alliance. 2 betrayed spouses united in our desire for revenge. The plan we developed was elegant in its simplicity. Jennifer would provide me with evidence of Rick's embezzlement and serial adultery. I would compile everything into a comprehensive dossier and send it to Rick's business clients, his professional contacts, and his family members. We would destroy his reputation, his business, and his relationships in one coordinated strike. It took us 3 days to put everything together. The final dossier was 47 pages long and included financial records, hotel receipts, photos, and a timeline of Rick's affairs going back 3 years. The cover letter was a masterpiece of understated devastation. Dear name, you may know Rick Davidson as a marketing professional or personal acquaintance. You may not know that Mr. Davidson has been systematically embezzling money from his business clients while conducting multiple extramarital affairs over the past 3 years. The attached documentation provides evidence of Mr. Davidson's financial crimes and personal misconduct. This information is being shared with his clients, colleagues, family members, and law enforcement as a matter of public safety and professional accountability. If you have had business dealings with Mr. Davidson, I recommend reviewing your financial records carefully and consulting with legal counsel if necessary. Sincerely, a concerned party. We sent the dossier to 43 recipients, including Rick's 5 biggest clients, his business partners, his parents, his siblings, and several professional organizations he belonged to. Then we waited. The response was swift and devastating. By Monday morning, Rick had lost 3 of his 5 major clients. By Tuesday, his business partner had filed a lawsuit against him. By Wednesday, his professional licenses were under review by the state licensing board. By Thursday, he'd been arrested for embezzlement. I found out about the arrest from Pete, who'd heard it from his wife, who'd heard it from her sister, who worked at the courthouse. Apparently, this Davidson guy was running some kind of scam on his business clients, Pete said as we reviewed inventory reports. Stealing money to pay for hotel rooms and fancy dinners. Real piece of work. Couldn't happen to a nicer guy, I said. Sarah called me that evening for the first time since she'd moved out. Did you do this? She asked without preamble. Do what? Don't play dumb, Jack. Rick was arrested yesterday. His business is ruined, his family won't talk to him, and he's probably going to prison. Did you do this? Rick did this to himself when he decided to steal money and fuck other men's wives. You destroyed his life. He destroyed our marriage. I'd say we're even. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was small and defeated. What happens now? Now you figure out how to rebuild your life without a married boyfriend to subsidize it. Jack, please. I know I hurt you, but Rick doesn't deserve this. Rick deserves exactly what he got, and so do you. I hung up before she could respond. The divorce was finalized 6 weeks later. Sarah got her car and half of our savings account. I got the house, my truck, and the satisfaction of knowing that Rick Davidson would be spending the next 2 years in minimum security prison. Jennifer Davidson got a favorable divorce settlement and Rick's house. She sent me a bottle of expensive champagne with a note that read, "To new beginnings and well-deserved endings." I drank the entire bottle while sitting on my back porch, watching the sunset and feeling genuinely happy for the first time in months. Sarah moved back in with her sister after Rick's arrest. I heard through the gossip network that she'd tried to visit him in jail, but he'd refused to see her. Apparently, he blamed her for his downfall, claiming that if she'd been more discreet about their affair, none of this would have happened. Even facing prison time, Rick Davidson couldn't take responsibility for his own actions. 6 months later, I ran into Mike and Jennifer at the grocery store. The encounter was awkward, but not hostile. "How are you doing, Jack?" Jennifer asked. "Better," I said honestly. "Much better." "We heard about Rick Davidson," Mike said. "That's some serious stuff." "Yeah, well, actions have consequences." "Sarah's been asking about you," Jennifer said carefully. "She wanted to know if you'd be willing to talk to her." "What would we talk about?" "I think she wants to apologize. Really apologize, not just make excuses." I considered this for a moment. Part of me was curious about what Sarah would say, whether she'd finally take responsibility for what she'd done. But a bigger part of me didn't care anymore. "Tell Sarah I hope she figures out how to be happy," I said. "But I'm not interested in relitigating the past." Mike and Jennifer nodded like they understood, and maybe they did. I finished my shopping and drove home to my empty house, which no longer felt empty. It felt peaceful. 3 months after that, I started dating a woman named Carol who worked at the bank where I'd refinanced my mortgage. She was divorced too, with 2 kids and a realistic understanding of how relationships could go wrong. We took things slowly, which suited both of us perfectly. A year after my divorce was finalized, I received a letter from Sarah. She'd moved to Boston and was working for a new real estate agency. She was seeing a therapist and had joined a support group for people who'd made relationship mistakes. The letter was 3 pages long and contained what seemed like a genuine apology for the pain she'd caused. She acknowledged that her affair had been a choice, not a mistake, and that she'd been selfish and cruel in how she'd handled our marriage. At the end, she wrote, "I don't expect you to forgive me, and I'm not asking for another chance. I just wanted you to know that I understand what I did was wrong, and I'm trying to become a better person." I read the letter twice, then filed it away in my desk drawer. I didn't respond, but I didn't throw it away either. Some things deserve to be remembered, even if they couldn't be forgiven. Rick Davidson was released from prison after 18 months. I heard he'd moved to Florida and was working as a used car salesman. His ex-wife Jennifer had remarried and seemed genuinely happy. As for me, Carol and I got engaged on a warm Saturday evening in September, 2 years after my divorce was finalized. We were sitting on my back porch, drinking wine and watching her kids play in the yard, when I realized I'd never been happier. "You know," I told her, "I used to think my life was over when Sarah left." "And now?" Carol asked. "Now I think it was just getting started." We were married the following spring, in a small ceremony attended by Pete and Margaret, Mike and Jennifer, who had eventually chosen our friendship over their loyalty to Sarah and Carol's family. It was the perfect day for a new beginning,